Park Mina adjusted her hiking boots for the third time that morning. The leather was still stiff from yesterday's rain, and she could feel a small stone pressing against her left heel. She looked up at the gray clouds hanging low over the mountain peaks and wondered if they would see sunshine today. "Everyone ready to move out?" called Lee Taewon from the front of their small group. His voice carried that tone of authority he always used when they went hiking together. Mina had known Taewon for 2 years now, ever since joining the Seoul Mountain Club. He was the kind of person who always had a plan and expected everyone to follow it. Kim Do-yeon was still stuffing his sleeping bag into his backpack. The young man worked at the same company as Mina, and this was only his third hiking trip with the group. He looked nervous as he struggled with the straps and buckles. His face was already red from the morning cold, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "Almost done," Do-yeon muttered, finally getting the bag secured. He stood up and nearly fell backward from the weight of his pack. "Wow, this is heavier than I thought." Lee Ha-young laughed from where she sat on a fallen log, eating an energy bar. She was the most experienced hiker in their group after Taewon, and she always seemed relaxed and confident on the trails. "You packed too much again, didn't you?" she teased Do-yeon. "Remember what I told you about only bringing what you really need?" The fifth member of their group, Choi Sung-min, was checking his camera equipment for the 100th time that morning. He was a photography student who joined their hiking trips to practice taking pictures of nature. His expensive camera hung around his neck, protected by a thick padded case. "The weather looks perfect for some dramatic shots," Sung-min said, pointing his camera toward the misty mountains. "Those clouds are going to create amazing lighting effects." Mina smiled at her friends but felt a small worry growing in her stomach. Something seemed different about this trip. Taewon had been acting strange for the past 2 days, checking his phone more often than usual and having quiet conversations with people when he thought no one was listening. During yesterday's hike to their camping spot, he had taken several wrong turns, which was unusual for him. He knew these mountains better than anyone in the group. "Let's get moving," Taewon said again, this time more firmly. "We have a long day ahead of us, and I want to reach Eagle's Peak before the weather changes." The group began walking up the narrow trail that wound through thick pine trees. The morning air smelled fresh and clean, with hints of pine needles and damp earth. Birds called to each other from the branches above, and somewhere in the distance Mina could hear the sound of running water. As they hiked, Mina found herself thinking about how she had ended up here. She had grown up in a small village not far from these mountains, spending her childhood exploring the forests and streams with her grandfather. He had taught her which plants were safe to eat, how to find water, and how to read the signs that nature gave about weather changes. When she moved to Seoul for university, she missed the mountains terribly. Joining the hiking club had been her way of staying connected to the place where she felt most at home. After 2 hours of steady climbing, the group stopped for a rest at a small clearing. Taewon pulled out his map and spread it on a flat rock. The others gathered around him, breathing heavily from the climb. "We're making good time," Taewon said, pointing to their location on the map. "But I think we should change our route a bit. Instead of going directly to Eagle's Peak, maybe we should take the longer path through Baekdam Valley. The views are supposed to be incredible from that direction." Ha-young frowned at the map. "That will add at least 3 hours to our hike. Are you sure we have enough food for the extra distance?" Do-yeon opened his pack and started counting the packages of dried food and energy bars. His face grew pale as he went through everything twice. "I think I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I was supposed to pack food for 3 days, but I only brought enough for 2 days. Maybe 2.5 if we eat very small portions." "What do you mean?" Mina asked, though she could already see the problem forming. "I miscalculated," Do-yeon admitted, his voice getting smaller. "I thought we were only staying 2 nights, not 3. I don't have enough food for everyone." Taewon looked angry, but then his expression changed to something that looked almost like relief. "Well, that's a problem we need to solve," he said, studying the map again. "But I think I know a solution." He pointed to a spot on the map near Baekdam Valley. "There's an old supply cache down here. The park rangers told me about it last month when I got my hiking permit. They said it was left over from a rescue operation earlier this year, and there might be emergency food and supplies still there. How far is it from our planned route? Hayoung asked. Not far, Taewon replied. Maybe an hour's walk down into the valley. The problem is it's in the opposite direction from where we're heading. Someone would have to go down there, get the supplies, and then climb back up to meet the rest of us. The group looked at each other uncertainly. None of them liked the idea of splitting up, especially with the weather looking unpredictable. I could go, Mina offered. She was the strongest hiker after Taewon, and she knew this area better than the others. I grew up around here, so I won't get lost, and I'm fast enough to catch up with you guys before evening. Are you sure? Hayoung asked. It's a lot of extra hiking and you'd be alone, Mina nodded. I'll be fine. My grandfather used to take me all through these valleys when I was little. I know the trails pretty well. Taewon seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then he smiled and clapped Mina on the shoulder. That would be perfect, actually. You're the best choice for this job. The rest of us can continue toward Eagle's Peak at a steady pace, and you can meet us at the evening campsite. What if I can't find the cache? Mina asked. You will, Taewon said confidently. The rangers were very specific about the location. It's tied to a large pine tree near a stream, about half a kilometer into the valley from the main trail. You can't miss it. As the group prepared to separate, Mina felt that worried feeling in her stomach again. She couldn't shake the sense that something was not quite right about this situation. But her friends were counting on her, and she had never let them down before. I'll see you all tonight, she said, shouldering her pack and checking that her water bottles were full. Be careful, Hayoung called after her as Mina started down the trail toward Baekdam Valley. Taewon watched her go with an expression that was hard to read. Then he turned to the others and said, Come on, let's keep moving. We have a schedule to keep. The trail down into Baekdam Valley was steeper than Mina remembered. Her boots slipped on loose rocks and she had to grab onto tree branches to keep her balance. The thick canopy of pine trees blocked most of the sunlight, making the forest feel darker and cooler than the mountain ridge where she had left her friends. As she walked deeper into the valley, the sounds of the mountain changed around her. The cheerful bird songs from earlier became quieter and more distant. Instead, she heard the steady drip of water from wet leaves and the soft rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. Her own footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the rocky path. After 40 minutes of careful walking, Mina reached the bottom of the valley. A small stream ran alongside the trail, its water clear and cold as it flowed over smooth stones. She knelt down and splashed some water on her face, enjoying the refreshing coolness against her skin. The air here smelled different too, more earthy and damp, with the rich scent of decomposing leaves. According to Taewon's directions, the supply cache should be somewhere near this stream. Mina began looking for a large pine tree that might be used as a landmark. There were many pine trees in the valley, but she was looking for one that stood out from the others. She found it 10 minutes later. The tree was massive, much older and larger than the others around it. Its trunk was so wide that it would take 3 people holding hands to reach all the way around it. The bark was dark and deeply grooved, and its lowest branches started high above her head. But as Mina approached the tree, she noticed something that made her stop walking. The ground around the base of the tree was disturbed. The fallen leaves had been kicked around and there were clear footprints in the soft earth. Someone had been here recently, and more than one person. Her heart started beating faster as she looked more carefully at the scene. Among the footprints, she spotted something that made her stomach clench with worry. 3 cigarette butts were scattered near the tree, their white filters standing out against the dark soil. The cigarettes looked fresh, not weathered by rain or time. Mina looked up and found what she was looking for. About shoulder height on the trunk of the tree, a metal box was secured with heavy chains and a padlock. This had to be the emergency supply cache that Taewon had told her about. But something was very wrong with what she saw. The padlock that was supposed to protect the cache had been cut. It hung open, useless, with shiny metal marks where something sharp had sliced through it. The cut looked recent, maybe only a day or 2 old. The metal was bright and clean, not rusty like it would be if the lock had been broken for a long time. Mina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool mountain air. Someone else had been here before her. Someone who had deliberately broken into the emergency supplies. But why would anyone do that? And why hadn't the park rangers mentioned that the cache had been compromised? She looked around the forest, suddenly feeling very alone and exposed. The trees that had seemed beautiful and peaceful a few minutes ago now felt like they could be hiding someone who was watching her. She listened carefully but heard only the normal sounds of the forest and the quiet babbling of the stream. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, Mina decided she needed to look inside the cache. Maybe whoever had broken the lock had left some supplies behind. Her friends were depending on her to bring back food, and she couldn't return empty-handed just because someone else had been here first. She reached up and carefully opened the metal box. What she found inside made her blood turn cold. Instead of emergency food rations, first aid supplies, or camping equipment, the cache contained things that had no business being in a mountain rescue station. Thick bundles of cash were stacked neatly in one corner, held together with rubber bands. The money looked real, and there was more of it than Mina had ever seen in one place. Next to the cash were several plastic folders containing what looked like identification cards and passports. Mina picked up one of the folders with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were multiple ID cards with different names, but all with the same photograph of a man she didn't recognize. The cards looked official and professional, but she knew they had to be fake. Why else would someone have so many different identities? At the bottom of the cache was something even more disturbing. Detailed photographs of hiking trails were spread out like a map. Some of the locations looked familiar to Mina, trails she had hiked before with her friends or her grandfather. But what scared her most were the red marks drawn on the photographs. Certain spots along the trails were circled in red ink, with notes written in handwriting she couldn't read clearly. Her hands shook as she picked up one of the photographs. It showed the exact trail she had taken to get down into this valley. A red circle marked the spot where she was standing right now next to the big pine tree. Someone had planned for her to be here, but the most terrifying discovery was still waiting for her at the very bottom of the cache. A cell phone that definitely didn't belong to any park ranger lay beneath all the other items. As Mina stared at it, the screen suddenly lit up with an incoming text message. The message was short, but made her heart pound with fear. Package delivered. Proceed as planned. Mina's mind raced as she tried to understand what she had stumbled into. This wasn't an emergency supply cache at all. This was some kind of drop point for illegal activities. The cache, the fake identification papers, the marked trail maps, and now this message about a package being delivered. With growing horror, she realized that she might be the package the message was talking about. Taewon had sent her here alone, to this specific location, at this exact time. He had insisted that she was the best person for the job, that she knew the area well, that she could handle the task by herself. But maybe getting supplies had never been the real purpose of this trip. Maybe Taewon had planned all along for her to find this cache, to see what was inside and to be here when someone came to collect whatever was supposed to happen next. The cigarette butts on the ground suddenly took on a new meaning. Someone had been here recently, waiting and watching. They might still be nearby, hidden in the forest, watching her right now as she discovered their secret operation. Mina quickly put everything back into the cache exactly as she had found it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the task. She needed to get away from this place as quickly as possible and figure out what to do next. But as she closed the metal box and started to back away from the tree, she heard something that made her freeze in terror. The sound of footsteps was coming through the forest toward her, and they were getting closer. Mina's heart hammered against her ribs as the footsteps grew louder. She pressed herself against the massive pine tree, trying to make herself as small as possible. The rough bark scraped against her back through her jacket, but she barely noticed the discomfort. All her attention was focused on the sounds coming from the forest. 2 sets of footsteps, she realized. 2 different people walking through the underbrush, not trying to be quiet anymore. They were moving with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. like they had been here many times before. Mina looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the valley offered few options. The stream was too shallow to provide cover, and the nearest cluster of thick bushes was 20 meters away. She would never reach them without being seen. The footsteps stopped just beyond her line of sight, hidden behind a group of smaller pine trees. She could hear quiet voices talking but couldn't make out the words. Then the talking stopped, and the footsteps resumed, coming directly toward her location. A tall man stepped out from behind the trees, and Mina's last hope of this being some innocent misunderstanding died completely. The man was wearing dark clothing that looked more suited for city streets than mountain hiking. His boots were clean and expensive, not the worn, practical footwear that real hikers used. But what scared her most was the way he moved, alert and careful, like someone who was used to dangerous situations. "You weren't supposed to look inside," the man said, his voice calm and controlled. He spoke like he was discussing the weather, not confronting someone who had discovered his illegal operation. A second man appeared from the opposite direction, cutting off Mina's escape route back up the trail. This one was shorter but looked just as dangerous. His face was hard and unfriendly, with small dark eyes that reminded Mina of a snake. Both men looked like they belonged in a crime movie, not in the peaceful mountains she had loved since childhood. "My name is Cho Jinwoo," the tall man said, as if introducing himself at a business meeting. "And this is my partner, Park Sang-ho. We've been waiting for you, Miss Park." The fact that he knew her name sent ice through Mina's veins. This wasn't a chance encounter or a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. These men had been expecting her specifically. They knew who she was and why she was here. "I don't understand," Mina said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the terror she felt. "I'm just looking for emergency supplies. My hiking group ran out of food." Jinwoo smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. "We know exactly why you're here. Your friend Taewon did exactly what we asked him to do. He sent you down here alone at the right time, to the right place." The full horror of the situation crashed over Mina like a cold wave. Taewon hadn't made a mistake or forgotten to mention that the cache had been broken into. He was working with these men. The whole hiking trip, the miscalculated food supplies, even Do-hyun's embarrassing mistake with the rations. It had all been planned. "Taewon is part of this," she whispered, more to herself than to the men watching her. "Smart girl," Sang-ho spoke for the first time, his voice rough and unpleasant. "Took you long enough to figure it out, though." Mina's mind raced as she tried to understand how deep this conspiracy went. Had her other friends known about the plan, or were they innocent victims like her? Were they safe, or were they in danger too? "What do you want from me?" she asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. "The problem," Jinwoo explained patiently, "is that you've seen too much. The cash, the money, the documents, the photographs. You could identify this location and lead the police right to our operation." "I won't tell anyone," Mina said quickly. "I'll forget I was ever here. I'll tell my friends I couldn't find the cache." Sang-ho laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the valley walls. "Sure you will. And next week, when you're safe back in Seoul, you'll change your mind and decide to be a hero. You'll call the police and tell them all about the bad men in the mountains." "We can't take that risk," Jinwoo added. "This operation is too important, and too many people depend on it. One curious hiker isn't going to ruin everything we've worked for." Mina realized with growing horror that these men had no intention of letting her leave the valley alive. They had used Taewon to lure her to this isolated spot where no one would hear her scream, where her body might not be found for weeks or months. "How long has Taewon been working for you?" she asked, still hoping there might be some misunderstanding. "About 6 months, Jinwoo replied. "We needed someone with access to hiking groups, someone who could identify potential problems before they became serious. Your friend has been very useful. He gives us information about who's planning to hike in our territory," Sang-ho added. "Most of the time we just change our schedule to avoid them. But sometimes, like today, we need to take more direct action." Mina thought about all the hiking trips she had taken with Taewon over the past months. How many times had he suggested specific routes or camping locations? How many times had he insisted on leading the group to particular areas? She had always trusted him completely, never questioning his decisions or wondering about his motives. The funny thing, Jinwoo continued, is that you would never have found this place if your friend hadn't sent you here. We chose this location, specifically because it's so remote and difficult to reach. Normal hikers never come down into this valley. But you know these mountains, don't you? Sang-ho asked. Taewon told us you grew up around here. That makes you more dangerous than the usual city hikers who stick to the main trails. Mina's childhood knowledge of the area, which had always made her feel confident and secure in the mountains, was now the very thing that had marked her as a threat to these criminals. Your grandfather used to bring you here when you were little, Jinwoo said, and Mina's blood ran cold. How much did these men know about her life? How long had they been watching her? That's why Taewon recommended you for this job, Sang-ho explained. He told us you were the perfect choice, smart enough to find the cash, brave enough to come alone, and familiar enough with the area to be a real problem if we let you go. So what happens now? Mina asked, though she dreaded the answer. Now, Jinwoo said, reaching into his jacket, we make sure you can't cause any trouble for our business. But Mina wasn't ready to give up without a fight. Her grandfather had taught her that mountains could be dangerous, but they also provided opportunities for those who knew how to use them. She had grown up in these valleys, and she knew things about this terrain that city criminals could never learn from maps and photographs. As Jinwoo's hand emerged from his jacket, Mina made her decision. She wasn't going to stand there and wait to become a victim. Mina's survival instincts exploded into action. Without thinking, she grabbed the heaviest item from her backpack, a metal camping cookpot that her grandfather had given her years ago. The pot was old and dented but solid, made from thick aluminum that could withstand years of outdoor use. Sang-ho was standing closer to her, his attention focused on whatever Jinwoo was pulling from his jacket. In that split second when both men were distracted, Mina swung the cookpot with all her strength, aiming directly at Sang-ho's head. The pot connected with a loud metallic clang that echoed through the quiet valley. Sang-ho stumbled backward, his hands flying to his forehead where a red mark was already forming. He cursed loudly, his voice filled with pain and surprise. "Get her!" Jinwoo shouted, but Mina was already moving. Instead of trying to run back up the steep trail where the men could easily catch her, she did something they didn't expect. She dove sideways into the thick undergrowth that lined the stream, crashing through branches and bushes like a wild animal. Thorns tore at her clothes and scratched her face, but she kept moving. Behind her, she could hear both men shouting and crashing through the forest in pursuit. Their expensive city boots weren't made for this kind of terrain, and they were having trouble keeping up with her frantic pace. Mina's childhood in these mountains now became her greatest weapon. While Jinwoo and Sang-ho stumbled over roots and got caught in brambles, she moved through the forest like she belonged there. Every summer of her youth had been spent exploring these valleys with her grandfather, learning which paths were safe and which ones led to dangerous dead ends. She went this way. Sang-ho's voice came from somewhere behind her, but it sounded farther away than before. Mina pressed deeper into the undergrowth, following animal trails that were invisible to anyone who didn't know how to look for them. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her mind was clear and focused. She had a destination in mind, a place her grandfather had shown her many years ago. The ravine she was heading toward cut through this section of the forest like a deep scar in the earth. Most people would see it as an impassable obstacle, a dangerous drop that could break bones or worse. But Mina knew secrets about this ravine that weren't marked on any map. As she ran, she could hear her pursuers getting closer again. Jinwoo was shouting instructions to Sang-ho, trying to coordinate their search. They were spreading out, attempting to surround her and cut off her escape routes. "There are only so many places she can go," Jinwoo called out. "The valley walls are too steep to climb. We just need to be patient and systematic." But Jinwoo didn't know about the old mining operations that had taken place in these mountains decades ago. Mina's grandfather had worked in those mines as a young man, back when the government was trying to extract copper and iron from the mountain rock. Most of the tunnels had been sealed when the mining stopped, but a few remained hidden and forgotten. The sound of rushing water grew louder as Mina approached the ravine. The stream that had been gently babbling near the supply cache became a roaring torrent as it plunged down the rocky slope. The noise would help mask her movements, but it would also make it harder for her to hear where her pursuers were. She reached the edge of the ravine and looked down. The drop was even steeper than she remembered, maybe 15 meters of nearly vertical rock face. At the bottom, white water crashed over boulders, creating a spray that made the rocks slippery and treacherous. "We've got her cornered." Sangho's voice came from the forest behind her. "She can't get down that cliff." Mina smiled grimly. That's exactly what she wanted them to think. Moving carefully along the rim of the ravine, she counted her steps until she found what she was looking for. A small pine tree grew at an odd angle near the edge, its roots anchored in a crack in the rock. To most people, it would look like just another tree. But to Mina, it was a landmark her grandfather had taught her to recognize. Just behind the angled tree, hidden by a curtain of hanging vines and barely visible even when you knew where to look, was a narrow opening in the rock face, the entrance to one of the old mine tunnels, forgotten by everyone except a few local people who had worked there decades ago. Mina pushed through the vines and squeezed into the opening. The tunnel was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for one person. The air inside smelled of damp stone and earth, with a metallic taste that reminded her of old mining equipment. She had only been in this tunnel once before, when she was 12 years old, and her grandfather wanted to show her a piece of local history. The tunnel was dangerous in some places, with loose rocks and sudden drops, but it connected to other passages that eventually emerged much farther down the valley. Behind her, she could hear Jinwoo and Sangho reaching the edge of the ravine. "Where did she go?" Sangho demanded. "She was right here a minute ago." "She must have gone down into the ravine," Jinwoo replied. "Check along the rim. Maybe there's a path we missed." "That's suicide," Sangho protested. "No one could survive that drop, especially not some city girl who works in an office." "Then where is she?" Jinwoo's voice was getting angry and frustrated. Mina smiled in the darkness of the tunnel. They were wrong about her on several counts. She wasn't a helpless city girl, and she definitely knew how to survive in these mountains better than they did. Moving carefully through the tunnel, she used her hands to feel along the rough stone walls. The passage curved and twisted, sometimes opening into larger chambers and sometimes narrowing so much that she had to crawl on her hands and knees. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Mina saw a faint glow ahead of her. Natural light was filtering in through another opening, this one much larger than the entrance she had used. She emerged from the tunnel onto a ledge halfway up the valley wall, nearly a kilometer away from where she had disappeared. From this vantage point, she could see the entire valley spread out below her. The stream wound through the forest like a silver ribbon, and she could just make out the massive pine tree where the supply cache was hidden. More importantly, she could see Jinwoo and Sangho still searching the area around the ravine, completely unaware that their quarry had escaped. But Mina's relief was short-lived as she realized the full scope of her problem. She was safe for the moment, but her friends were still somewhere up on the mountain, possibly in danger. If Taewon was really working with these criminals, there was no telling what might happen to Do-hyun, Ha-young, and Sung-min. She needed to get help, but first, she had to figure out how to contact the authorities from this remote location. Her cell phone had no signal this deep in the mountains, and the nearest ranger station was hours away by foot. As she considered her options, Mina heard something that made her blood run cold. From somewhere far below, carried on the wind, came the sound of Jinwoo's voice talking on a phone. "The package got away," he was saying. "We need to activate the backup plan immediately." From her position on the ledge, Mina watched Jinwoo pace back and forth while talking on his phone. His voice carried clearly in the thin mountain air, and what she heard made her stomach twist with fear. "Yes, I understand," Jinwoo was saying. "If the girl escaped, then we follow the original backup plan. Deal with the rest of the hiking group before they can ask questions about why she never returned." Mina pressed herself against the cold rock wall, her mind racing. Her friends had no idea they were in danger. They were probably sitting around their campfire right now, wondering why she was taking so long to return with the supplies. Do-yun might be making jokes about his mistake with the food calculations. Ha-young could be taking pictures of the sunset. Seungmin was likely cleaning his camera equipment for tomorrow's hike. None of them knew that Taewon was planning to hurt them. How much time do I have? Jinwoo continued his phone conversation. Good. That gives us plenty of time to clean up this mess and make it look like an accident. Mina felt sick as she realized what clean up this mess meant. These criminals were planning to murder her friends and make it appear like a hiking accident. People died in the mountains all the time from falls, exposure, or getting lost. No one would question the deaths of a group of inexperienced city hikers who had ventured too far into dangerous territory. She had to warn them somehow. But first she needed to get to a place where her phone would work. The ledge where she was hiding was still too deep in the valley to get a cell signal. Looking up at the rocky slope above her, Mina plotted a route to higher ground. Her grandfather had taught her to read the mountain like a book, to see which rocks were solid and which ones might crumble under her weight. The climb would be dangerous, especially without proper equipment, but she had no choice. As she began, working her way up the steep slope, Mina could hear Sang-ho shouting to Jinwoo from somewhere near the ravine. I found something, Sang-ho called. There's some kind of cave or tunnel entrance hidden behind these vines. Impossible, Jinwoo replied, but his voice sounded worried. The maps don't show any caves in this area. Come look for yourself. Someone definitely went through here recently. The vines are broken and there are scuff marks on the rocks. Mina climbed faster, knowing that once they discovered the mining tunnel, they would realize she had escaped their trap. Her hands were already scraped and bleeding from gripping the rough stone, but she pushed through the pain. 20 minutes later, she reached a narrow ridge that ran along the top of the valley wall. From this height, she could see for kilometers in every direction. The main hiking trail was visible as a thin brown line cutting across the mountainside, and she could just make out a small cluster of tents in the distance where her friends had made camp. More importantly, her phone finally showed 2 bars of signal. Her hands shook as she dialed the emergency number for the mountain rescue service. The dispatcher who answered sounded tired and bored, like she had dealt with too many false alarms from panicked hikers. Mountain rescue. What is your emergency? My name is Park Mina, she said, trying to keep her voice calm and clear. I'm calling to report armed criminals operating in the Baekdam Valley area. They have weapons and they're planning to attack a group of hikers. Armed criminals? The dispatcher's tone became more alert. Can you describe the location more specifically? Mina gave the exact coordinates of the supply cache and described the 2 men who had tried to capture her. She explained about the money, fake documents, and marked trail maps she had found. Most importantly, she warned about the immediate danger to her hiking companions. I need you to send help to the Eagles Peak camping area right away, she insisted. There are 4 hikers there who don't know they're in danger. One of them is working with the criminals. We're dispatching a team, immediately, the dispatcher assured her. Can you get to a safe location and wait for rescue? I can't wait, Mina replied. My friends might not have much time. I'm going to try to warn them myself. Before the dispatcher could argue, Mina ended the call and started running along the ridge toward the distant campsite. The rocky terrain made running difficult, but her desperation gave her strength she didn't know she had. As she ran, she thought about everything her grandfather had taught her during their long hikes through these mountains. He had always said that mountains were dangerous places that demanded respect, but they also rewarded people who understood their secrets. Today, those secrets had already saved her life once. The ridge trail eventually connected to the main hiking path, cutting nearly an hour off the normal route to Eagles Peak. Mina pushed herself to maintain a punishing pace, ignoring the burning in her lungs and the sharp pain in her side. As the sun began to set behind the western peaks, she finally spotted the orange glow of a campfire ahead. Her friends' voices carried on the evening breeze, and for a moment, everything seemed normal and peaceful. They were laughing about something, probably one of Do-yun's clumsy mistakes or Seungmin's obsession with getting the perfect photograph. But then she heard Taewon's voice rising above the others, and the words he spoke made her blood freeze. We should probably start looking for Mina, Taewon was saying. She's been gone a long time and it's getting dark. Maybe something happened to her. Should we call for help? That was Ha-young's voice, full of genuine concern. Not yet, Taewon replied smoothly. Let's give her a little more time. But if she's not back in an hour, we might need to consider the possibility that she had an accident. Mina realized that Taewon was already setting up his story. When Jinwoo and Sangho failed to return from the valley, he would tell the others that both Mina and the two rescuers he had sent to find her had tragically fallen victim to the dangerous mountain terrain. She crept closer to the campsite, staying hidden in the shadows beyond the firelight. Through the trees she could see her 4 companions sitting around the flames. Do-hyun was poking at the fire with a stick. Ha-young was studying her map with a worried expression. Seungmin was cleaning his camera lens with obsessive care, and Taewon was checking his phone, probably waiting for confirmation that his criminal partners had completed their deadly mission. It was time to turn the tables on the man who had betrayed them all. Mina took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows into the firelight. Her sudden appearance made all 4 of her companions jump in surprise. Do-hyun dropped his stick into the flames, sending up a shower of sparks. Ha-young gasped and put her hand over her heart. Seungmin nearly dropped his expensive camera, but it was Taewon's reaction that confirmed everything Mina suspected. For just a split second, his face showed not relief or joy at seeing her safe, but pure terror. He had not expected to see her alive again. "Mina!" Ha-young exclaimed, jumping up from her seat on a fallen log. "Thank goodness you're okay. We were getting so worried about you." "Where have you been?" Do-hyun asked. "Did you find the emergency supplies?" Mina looked directly at Taewon as she answered. "I found exactly what you sent me to find," she said quietly. "But it wasn't food or camping equipment." Taewon's face had returned to its normal expression, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was trying to figure out how much she knew and what he should do about it. "What do you mean?" Seungmin asked, lowering his camera. "What did you find down there?" "I found a cache full of illegal money, fake identification papers, and photographs of hiking trails marked with red circles," Mina explained, never taking her eyes off Taewon. "I also found 2 men waiting for me, men who knew my name and were expecting me to show up at that exact time and place." The silence that followed her words was broken only by the crackling of the campfire. Ha-young and Do-hyun looked confused, not understanding what Mina was talking about. Seungmin seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation faster, his face growing pale in the firelight. "That's impossible," Taewon said, but his voice sounded strained. "The park rangers told me there were emergency supplies down there. Maybe you went to the wrong location." "The men knew you by name, Taewon," Mina continued. "They told me you've been working with them for 6 months, giving them information about hiking groups and helping them avoid detection." "That's crazy," Taewon protested, but sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. "Why? Would I be involved with criminals? You're obviously confused or upset about something." Do-hyun was starting to understand what was happening. "Are you saying Taewon deliberately sent you into danger?" he asked. "I'm saying he sent me to be killed," Mina replied bluntly. "And when those men failed to eliminate me, the backup plan was to kill all of us and make it look like a hiking accident." Ha-young stood up so quickly that she knocked over her water bottle. "This is insane. Taewon would never hurt us. He's been our friend for years." But Seungmin was studying Taewon's face with the same careful attention he used when framing a photograph. "She's telling the truth," he said slowly. "Look at him. He's terrified." Taewon's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand," he said desperately. "I didn't have a choice. These people don't take no for an answer. They threatened my family, my job, everything I care about." "So you decided to sacrifice us instead?" Mina asked. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Taewon pleaded. "At first they only wanted information about which trails were being used by hikers. I thought I was just helping them avoid encounters with tourists. I didn't know they were planning to hurt anyone." "But you knew today," Mina pointed out. "You knew you were sending me to die." Taewon's shoulders sagged in defeat. "They said if I didn't cooperate, they would kill my sister and her children. What was I supposed to do?" You were supposed to go to the police, Hyung said angrily. You were supposed to protect your friends, not betray them. Before Taewon could respond, they all heard the sound of helicopters approaching from the distance. The rhythmic beating of rotor blades echoed off the mountain walls, growing louder by the second. I called for help, Mina explained to her friends. Mountain rescue and police are on their way. 2 helicopters appeared over the ridge, their searchlights cutting through the gathering darkness. One landed in a nearby clearing while the other continued circling overhead, its light sweeping across the forest below. Armed police officers and mountain rescue personnel quickly surrounded their campsite. The lead officer, a serious-looking woman in her 40s, approached the group with her weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. I'm Captain Lee Suman with the Mountain Police Unit, she announced. We received a report about criminal activity in this area. Which one of you is? Park Mina. Mina stepped forward and identified herself. The 2 men I told you about are still down in Baekdam Valley, she said. They were searching for me in the old mining tunnels when I escaped. We have teams moving to that location now, Captain Lee assured her. We also want to talk to all of you about what happened here tonight. Over the next hour, Mina gave a detailed statement about everything she had discovered. Hyung, Dohyun, and Seungmin were shocked to learn the full extent of Taewon's involvement with the criminal organization. I had no idea, Dohyun kept repeating. All those hiking trips where he chose the routes, I just thought he was being helpful. He was gathering intelligence for smugglers, Captain Lee explained. They were using these mountain trails to transport illegal goods across the border. Your friend was providing them with information about when and where legitimate hikers might interfere with their operations. As dawn broke over the mountains, news came that Jinwoo and Sangho had been captured while trying to escape through the mining tunnel system. They had been carrying weapons and additional evidence that linked them to a large smuggling network operating throughout the region. This investigation has been going on for over a year, Captain Lee told the group as they prepared to leave the mountain. Your discovery of that cache and your quick thinking to call for help has given us the breakthrough we needed to shut down their entire operation. Taewon was arrested and taken away in one of the helicopters, but not before he apologized one final time to his former friends. I'm sorry, he said as the officers led him away. I know that doesn't change anything, but I really am sorry. 3 months later, Mina received word that the investigation had led to the arrest of 15 people involved in the smuggling network. The evidence she had found in the supply cache had been crucial in identifying other locations and methods used by the criminals. Her quick thinking and intimate knowledge of the mountain terrain had not only saved her own life and the lives of her friends, but had helped shut down a criminal operation that had been operating undetected for years. Mina never went hiking with a group again without first making sure she knew and trusted everyone involved. The mountains she had loved since childhood were still beautiful and peaceful, but she had learned that the most dangerous predators were often the ones who gained your trust first. Her grandfather would have been proud of how she used everything. He had taught her to survive and protect others. Sometimes the difference between life and death came down to knowing the land beneath your feet and trusting your instincts when something felt wrong.